Assalamu alaikum. So today I have brought another vlog in my series of vlogs on literary theory simplified. Today we are going to discuss post-colonial criticism. So what is post-colonial criticism? Post-colonial theory is a literary theory or critical approach that deals with literature produced in countries that were once or are now colonies of other countries. Post-colonial theory became part of the critical toolbox in the 1970s, and many practitioners credit Edward Said's book, Orientalism, as being the foundational work. Post-colonialism concerns itself with the study of the colonization, which began as early as the Renaissance, the decolonization, which involves winning back and reconstituting the native cultures, a new colonizing process, and aftermath of postmodernism and late capitalism, when multinational corporations control the world. Focusing on the omnipresent power struggles between cultures and the intersection of cultures, which results in multiculturalism and polyvalency of culture, post-colonialism analyzes the metaphysical, ethical, psychological, and political concerns about cultural identity, gender, nationality, race, ethnicity, subjectivity, language, and power. The important theories, there are many actually important theories. The major theoretical works in post-colonial theory include The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, Orientalism by Edward Said, in other words by Gayatri Spivak, The Empire Writes Back by Bill Ashcroft et al., Nation and Narration by Homi Bhabha, and Culture and Imperialism again by Edward Said. What are the major assumptions of post-colonialism? Influenced by the post-structuralist and postmodern idea of decentering, post-colonial literary criticism undermines the universalist claims of literature, identifies colonial sympathies in the canon, and replaces the colonial meta-narratives with counter-narratives of resistance by rewriting history and asserting cultural identities through strategies such as separatism, nativism, cultural syncretism, hybridity, mimicry, active participation, and assimilation. Backed by an anti-essentialist notion of identity and culture, it critiques cultural hierarchies and the Eurocentrism of modernity. Some key terms are important if we want to understand post-colonial criticism. Number one is othering. Othering involves two concepts, the exotic other and the demonic other. The exotic other represents a fascination with the inherent dignity and beauty of the primitive or undeveloped other, as delineated in Yeats's Byzantium poems, while the demonic other is represented as inferior, negative, savage, and evil, as is described in the novels like Heart of Darkness or A Passage to India. Another important key term is hybridity or syncretism. The schizophrenic state of migrant and the attempts to combine the culture of origin with that of the host country without abandoning either is called hybridity or syncretism. This leads to the emergence of new identities where the original identity, historical experiences, and memories are not abandoned but is constructively merged with the host culture to move beyond the constructed limits of both, forging solidarities against essential racial oppression. Third critical term is double consciousness. A major concept formulated by Du Bois, double consciousness echoes Frantz Fanon's contention of the divided self in black skin, white mask, that the black always sees himself through the eyes of the white. Du Bois described double consciousness as two souls, two thoughts in one dark body, which Mina Alexander later altered as many souls, many thoughts in one dark body, pointing to the migrant's experience in multiple subject positions. Another important literary term in post-colonialism is mimicry. Homi Bhabha notes that mimicry is the process by which the colonized subject is reproduced as almost the same but not quite. It contains both mockery and menace. It reveals the limitations in the authority of the colonial discourse, almost as though the colonial authority inevitably embodies the seeds of its own destruction. Another important key term is subaltern. Subaltern is a term introduced by Antonio Gramsci to refer to the working class and used and popularized by Gayatri Spivak in the post-colonial context in Can the Subaltern Speak? Spivak ridicules the hypocrisy of post-colonial discourses that claim to raise the voices of hitherto unheard, while they inadvertently serve to perpetuate the marginality and the subalternity of the oppressed. Gender is also important in post-colonial theory. Post-colonial gender discourse discusses the double colonization of women by both imperialism and patriarchy. In post-colonial literature, gender and sexuality have become prominent themes in the last decades of the 20th century. Nation. In post-colonial literature, the nation-building process or project seeks to erase the colonial past by rejecting and resisting the Western constructions of the other as primitive, savage, or demonic. However, post-colonialism brings with it a new process of exclusion, marginalization, and subalternization, and the continuation of colonialism through the formation of the elite. So what is the method if we apply all these assumptions to our analysis of the literary text? So how would we approach the text using a post-colonial theory? Post-colonial critics reinterpret and examine the values of literary texts by focusing on the context in which they are produced, and they reveal the colonial ideologies that are concealed within. They ask questions such as, where and when is the work set? In a colony, a former colony, or a country that has gained its independence from Great Britain, Spain, France, or some other political power? How does the text depict relations between the colonizer and the colonized? What principles of colonialism operate in the text? Do colonial powers usurp land, exploit the economy or environment, or enslave the indigenous population? Post-colonial criticism endeavors to probe beneath the obvious and apparently universal aesthetic or humanist themes in order to reveal their racial, gendered, and imperial assumptions. It focuses particularly on the way in which literature by the colonizing culture distorts the experience and realities and inscribes the inferiority of the colonized people on literature by colonized peoples, which attempts to articulate their identity and reclaim their past in the face of that past inevitable otherness. It can also deal with the way in which literature in colonizing countries appropriates the language, images, scenes, traditions, and so forth of the colonized countries. Some examples. Post-colonial critics interpret and examine the value of a literary text by focusing on the context in which they were produced and reveal the colonial ideologies that are concealed within. Such approaches are exemplified in Chinua Achebe's rereading of Conrad's Heart of Darkness, Edward Said's rereading of Jane Austen's Mansfield Park, and Sarah Suleri's rereading of Kipling's Kim, and Homi Kebaba's rereading of Foster's A Passage to India. There are definitely some limitations to this approach as well. Like any other form of criticism, post-colonialism presents some limitations. It sometimes implies a romantic vision of the other and simplistic politics. Although the emphasis on difference, post-colonial theory sometimes conflates very distinct cultures under one umbrella term of the third word. While some post-colonial criticism has been groundbreaking, other work has done little to change unequal relationships between the countries. So to conclude, post-colonial literary criticism utilizes many critical methods, both literary and non-literary. Deconstruction, new historicism, Marxism, feminist theory, anthropology, sociology, and popular culture studies to investigate literature written in English by writers from or informally colonized countries. Influenced by the post-structuralist and postmodern idea of decentering, Postcolonial literary criticism undermines the universalist claims of literature, identifies colonial sympathies in the canon, and replaces the colonial meta-narratives with counter-narratives of resistance. By rewriting history and asserting cultural identities through strategies such as nativism, hybridity, mimicry, and assimilation. I hope that you enjoyed this brief presentation on on postcolonialism and in my attempt to simplify literary theory for you. Thank you so much. God bless you all.